This one messed me up for a while, and I'm still not completely okay, but it has gotten easier to cope. It was the middle of the summer, and my parents had left for the weekend to go to our vacation home in Cape Cod. It was about a 2-hour drive away, so it was really no big deal for them to leave me alone for a few days. My mom had made some pulled pork and pasta for me to heat up whenever I got hungry, and she also left pizza money, so things were all good. The first night I was alone, I stayed up till 3 in the morning playing video games, so I woke up really late the next day. I checked my phone when I woke up and saw it was a little past 1. I had made plans to play street hockey with my friends at 3, so I threw myself out of bed and stumbled into the shower. I was in there for about 45 minutes on my phone, just scrolling, when I swear I heard the front door open. I immediately froze, since obviously I was supposed to be home alone. The bathroom was on the opposite side of the house from the front door, but the thing is pretty loud when it opens and closes. I waited for about 2 minutes, straining my ears, trying to hear anything, but there was just silence. At that point, I figured it was just the wind, or maybe my parents were home early, so I turned off the shower, wrapped my towel around myself, and slowly walked down the stairs to check it out. The stairs to the kitchen are pretty tight and walled in, so I actually couldn't see into the kitchen until I reached the final segment of the stairs. Unfortunately, my house is very old, and each step on the stairs makes a super loud creak, but I took my time and tried to be as quiet as possible. When I got to the second to last set of stairs, I took a little breath to compose myself. Feeling more reassured mentally, I sort of chuckled to myself for being so ridiculous and just normally walked the last bit of stairs and turned the corner into the kitchen. That was a big mistake. Standing about 2 feet away from me in the middle of my kitchen was a man staring at me, perfectly still, with a massive smile on his face. Just staring at me, sizing me up. What I remember most vividly wasn't his face or his smile, but his arms. They weren't just at his side, he held them in the strangest, most abnormal position I've ever seen. He looked almost demonic. Honest to God, I think I almost had a heart attack right there. In complete shock, my fight or flight response kicked in, and I just took a step towards him and punched him as hard as I could in the jaw. The second I connected, I beelined up the stairs, dropping my towel in the kitchen with my heart beating out of control. I sprinted into my room and locked the door behind me. Driven by pure adrenaline, I quickly put a chair up against the doorknob like you see in TV and moved my dresser over. And then, almost without thinking, I called 911 and nearly in tears, started to tell the operator what happened. As I sat on the floor of my room, practically in the fetal position, staring at the door, praying that a cop would be here soon, I noticed a light coming from underneath my door had stopped. The man was now standing outside of my door. There are no words to describe the feeling I had. I was paralyzed with fear, watching the shadow across the bottom of the door shift in tiny ways. I stayed curled up, just staring at that gap, praying the man would go away for what seemed like an hour. All the while, the 911 operator was asking,
"Hello, sir? Sir, are you there? Hello?"
but I didn't want to make a noise, and even if I wanted to move my arms to bring the phone to my mouth, I don't think I could have. Eventually, the shadow moved away, and I heard the faintest of footsteps slowly creaking the wooden floorboards as he walked down the hall. It was silent for minutes as I continued to just sit there, curled up, unable to even speak. What felt like an eternity later, I heard banging on the front door and the sound of 2 officers entering my house. Finally, in that moment, I felt safe again, and I opened the door to the 2 of them standing there. I genuinely almost cried tears of joy. Ever since this happened, my parents don't leave me home alone anymore, and I check every lock in the house before going to bed. I get nightmares occasionally, and my heart is prone to racing in any remotely scary situation, but I'm doing all right. Even working with sketch artists and a few lineups, the police never found whoever it was in my house. That sends shivers down my spine every time I look outside, half expecting to see him standing across the street, smiling under a lamppost. I have no idea who he was or what he wanted, but regardless, I just hope I never see him again. This happened in April of 2018. For some background, I live in a major city in Texas. My apartment complex is gated and in a good neighborhood, but the security isn't extremely tight. At times, the gates are left open and anyone could piggyback off of someone else entering with the access code. We also tend to have frequent door-to-door solicitors, even though there are signs forbidding it. So, this particular Friday evening, I go to bed at about 2:30 a.m. For some reason, I was having trouble going to sleep, so I put on a YouTube channel I like to listen to and eventually start to doze off. Sometime later, I became aware of a noise that sounded like a clicking sound, but it also sounded similar to one of my upstairs neighbors making some noise, so I kind of zoned it out, as I'm used to my neighbors staying up late on the weekends. After about 30 seconds though, I realized the noise was extremely repetitive and getting louder. I started focusing on it more intently, trying to isolate what it could be and where it was coming from. Suddenly, it hit me like a ton of bricks. The noise was coming from my front door. I quickly leapt out of bed and headed to the foyer. I recognized the noise right away. The lock mechanism was moving back and forth rapidly, like someone was trying to unlock the front door. I could also hear an object being inserted into the lock, and the person was jimmying it back and forth with a lot of force. Instinctively, I turned around, headed to my bedside safe, unlocked it with the combination, and pulled out my pistol. I headed back to the door, and as I exited the bedroom, my heart dropped. I saw the front door lock twist and then unlatch. Immediately, I pointed my weapon straight ahead, knowing that if someone came through, I would have to make a split-second decision. With difficulty, I decided that if someone came through the door, I would give them a momentary chance to retreat, but if they did anything other than that, or entered aggressively, I was going to shoot and ask questions later. Fortunately for both of us, they didn't enter, because I had also locked the deadbolt earlier. When I first moved in a year prior, I remember thinking that the deadbolt was a great security feature, and I got in the habit of always keeping it locked when I was home. In hindsight, this decision saved me from a life-or-death confrontation. Upon realizing that the deadbolt was in place, I approached the door and looked through the keyhole. On the other side were 2 men and 1 woman. All 3 were wearing hoodies, so it was difficult to make out their faces. The men had objects in their hands, but I couldn't make out exactly what. The 2 men were talking back and forth, probably trying to figure out why they couldn't open the door. And the woman was also talking loudly to the point where anyone in the hallway would have been able to hear her voice. She was talking in another language. The only words I could make out were, "Apartment 250. She kept repeating that over and over like a broken record. Upon hearing that, I started to wonder for a moment if maybe they were just drunk and had the wrong apartment number. But that was impossible. To open my lock, they would have had to have a copy of my exact key or some kind of lock-picking device. I've never copied my key or given it to anyone, and here's the other thing. Not only is 250 not my apartment number, but that apartment number doesn't exist anywhere in the complex. Standing back from the door, I took a long broom handle and jabbed it hard into the face of the door, letting them know I was on the other side. Immediately, they stopped fiddling with the lock and took off running. I debated whether to call 911, but decided against it unless they returned. I knew they would be long gone by the time anyone got there. I also decided it would be too risky to follow them, not knowing what objects those men had in their hands. The next day, I filed the police report and let the apartment management know. They said it was unusual, but they would alert the resource officer and ask for a police presence for a couple of nights. As far as I know, nothing ever came of the report. That's not a surprise to me. It's been 7 months since it happened. No further incidents. Nobody else in the apartment has reported anything similar happening. People say you don't really know what you'll do in those situations until it really happens. But I can honestly say I'm proud of how I stayed calm and was mentally prepared to defend myself. If there's one good thing that came out of the situation, it's that I now feel confident that I can respond in the right way when faced with the unthinkable. Back when I was 16 years old, I had to physically defend myself in my own home. It happened during the summer. Both my parents went to visit some relatives out of town, and they wouldn't be home for 3 days. I was an only child, and after my parents left, I was the only one left in the house. My grandma lived close by though, and visited me every single day to make me lunch, but after that, she typically went back home. She never stayed during the night, and that's when I went wild, watching movies and YouTube, gaming, eating junk food. Everything you could picture a 16-year-old doing when his parents aren't home. Everything was quiet and normal the first night, but the second night, I was watching a movie when I ran out of chips. My room was on the second floor, so I paused the movie and went down to the kitchen to grab some more. I refilled my bowl with Doritos and put the bag back in the pantry. But then, just as I was about to go back upstairs, I heard a window break followed by a door opening. The kitchen was separate and not visible from the living room where I had heard the noise, but I felt my heart start to race. I forced myself to think. I quickly grabbed the knife and slowly peeked my head around the corner to see into the living room. That's when I saw him. He was a large man over 6 feet tall, wearing a baseball cap and some old leather jacket that was torn up. My phone was still in the room upstairs, and I was rattled, but I thought I could sneak past him and lock myself in. The intruder was loudly going through the shelf right around the corner from the stairs I needed to go to, but still, I made my move. I quickly made it to the stairs, but then he turned around and realized I was there. To this day, I still remember the moment we made eye contact. Driven by pure terror, I screamed and threw the knife at him, but I missed. Instead, the knife hit the wall beside his head and got stuck. Fortunately though, I guess he got scared by me and my savage screaming, and he started trying to run out of the house before I could grab another knife. When I was pretty sure he had left, I sprinted to my room, locked myself in, and called the cops. They came as quickly as they could and secured the house, took fingerprints, and also any DNA samples they could find. I was shaken up, but I was just thankful that no one got hurt. The next morning, I called my parents and they came back as soon as they could, arriving at noon. Upon walking in the house, the first question they asked was, "Why is there a knife in the wall?" So I filled my parents in on what happened, and that same day, we changed the front door with a more heavy-duty one. In a stroke of good luck, the police managed to arrest the intruder within that same week. I can't lie, that was a great comfort to me because I was very concerned this man was going to come back and try the same thing again. But then, funny enough, one of the cops told me that the guy was apparently thinking I was going to kill him and tried to call the police on me for attempted murder. So I guess the moral of the story is, acting like a maniac isn't a terrible defense for the rare occasion when someone's trying to rob your house.